Emissions from transportation come mainly from burning fossil fuels in the sectors of aviation, freight, rail, marine transport, and of course passenger transport. Their magnitude is country dependent and there are significant differences between the regions. On a global scale, road travel accounts for 3/4 of transport emissions. Most of this comes from passenger vehicles, cars and buses, which contribute 45.1%. The other 29.4% comes from trucks carrying freight. Aviation, while it often gets the most attention in discussion on action against climate change, accounts only for 11.6% of transport emissions. It emits just under 1 billion tons of CO2 each year, around 2.5% of total global emissions. International shipping contributes a similar amount at 10.6%. Rail travel, freight, emits very little, only 1% of transport emissions. Other transport, which is mainly the movement of materials such as water, oil, or gas via pipelines, is responsible for roughly 2.2%. With that said, now I invite you to research your own country and see how they are doing in terms of emissions, trends, and different sectors. You can visit ourworldindata.org to see the statistics for your region. First, let's look at the United States. In the United States in 2018, transportation accounted for the largest portion, 28% of total US greenhouse gas emissions, followed by electricity sector at 27%, industry sector at 22%, and the last three were agriculture, commercial, and residential. In terms of the transport sector emissions, 82% of all transportation emissions were allocated to light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles and trucks, with the second biggest source of emissions being aviation at 9%. Next, we will travel across the Atlantic and visit the Netherlands, which is home to TU Delft. As you see on this slide, transportation is the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the Netherlands. Energy sector is the largest contributor at 33%, followed by the industry sector at 19%. And transport contributes 18% of total greenhouse gas emissions. On the right-hand side of the image, under EU, which stands for European Union, you can see how much each sector contributes to greenhouse gas emissions in that region. Looking at the distance traveled by means of transport in the Netherlands, we see that roughly 70% kilometers are driven by car. Other modes are responsible for far modest number of kilometers, with public transport at around 12% and bikes at nearly 7%. Although this is not a fair comparison by any means, because these are two different regions with different histories and land use policies. In the European Union, transport contributes to about 1/5 of total emissions, whereas in the United States, it contributes to nearly 1/3. Now, let's visit China. Together with the United States, China's emissions are a substantial part of the overall global emissions. In 2016, transport sector was the fourth largest contributor to overall greenhouse gas emissions in China. Although it was around 7% of total emissions, the magnitude in terms of tons of the greenhouse gases was quite significant. A different way of measurement, as opposed to by the sector, is to track CO2 emissions from liquid fuel consumption. Please note that the emissions from liquid fuel consumption measurement do not only come from transportation, but can also include other sectors like energy or heat. China emits around 1.3 million of kilotons. For comparison, the entire sub-Saharan Africa region emits only less than 290,000 of kilotons of CO2. The Netherlands, on the other hand, emits slightly above 60,000 of kilotons of CO2 from liquid fuel consumption. What's interesting about this graph is that it has not been increasing over time like the other two. While examining figures and graphs that show us trends, percentages, and magnitudes of greenhouse gas emissions, we have to remember to refrain from directly comparing regions, as they largely vary by population size and land use. It is also helpful to always examine overall trends and see whether they are increasing or decreasing. looking at the emissions from a few different countries helps to gain more understanding about the complexity of analyzing emissions from transportation, as well as the fact that regardless of the magnitude of tons of greenhouse gases, transportation sector is usually one of the biggest contributors to the overall emissions, regardless of the geographical location.